God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unapologetic. I'm so excited you're with us today. I am interviewing my friend, Ivey, and we talk all things transgender, public school, and adopted families. It's a fantastic conversation. We also talk about her new book, God Made You to Be You, which is available everywhere books are sold. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're going to start off the conversation how we do every episode. Unapologetic is about being unashamed of the gospel. So I'm going to ask you, what do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
Okay, I knew you were going to ask me this. I was so nervous about it. But this is what I want to say is last year in 2020, it was really hard. It was hard for my family. It was hard for a lot of families. And my husband was actually diagnosed with depression. And I had not systematic. I had depression. I had anxiety years ago with young kids. Yeah. And I just remember feeling so sorry and embarrassed, but I just needed extra help. I needed my community. I needed my friends. I needed medicine for a little while. Yeah. I needed more Jesus. Yeah. And so I think we should stop apologizing when we need help.
Yes. So why do you think people apologize for needing help?
Because Christians? we think we just we need to figure it out. We're Christians or Jesus can solve all of it. And now he does solve all of our problems. Right. I also believe in modern medicine and I believe in counseling and I believe in community. And so I think those are graces that God gives us for our lives. But I think sometimes we think, you know what? I'm not supposed to need this stuff. I just am supposed to pray more. And while you should pray more, you should also go see a doctor. Yes. Or a counselor or a therapist and to see how God can use that to help you as well. Right. So I think it comes from maybe pride, maybe somehow believing that as a Christian, you're supposed to be able to know how to do everything. Right. And that's just not true.
I think also just people not understanding verses in scripture that are about anxiety and are about there is general worry that we can give to God, but then there are also times your brain is just off because of things going on and you need extra help. I always say miserable Christians don't bring anyone to Christ. And I mean, if you're anxious or depressed, no one's yes, I would love to be like you. So exactly. Even from that perspective, but that's not even what we were talking about today. But I love Christian therapy, and also I think people get scared with medicine, but God can convict you no matter what. Totally. I've heard people say they're worried, what if I become numb and what if I can't hear the Holy Spirit? It's no. God's
God's way bigger
than that. Yeah.
Let's not put him in a box.
Yeah. And it's just interesting. I told this story on another episode, but it's whenever we've been explaining to Christians why it's okay to get help, and sometimes it's medicine, sometimes it's not. But that whenever bifocals came out, Christians were against
Are you serious?
That. And they were saying, if you had enough faith, you could see.
Oh, my gosh.
And so that's an age-old situation.
I've never heard that, but that's crazy. And no one would even think twice about putting your readers on at the Mexican restaurant so you can read the menu.
Right. Yeah. Right. And especially, the things that help you fulfill your calling. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And I love that topic. That's not even what we're going to talk about.
I know,
today.
but I do love it as well. But I think it applies even when we talk about motherhood and marriage. And we've walked through that in our family. And it's been, it's been a challenge that we've had to journey through that we never intended or knew would happen 20 years ago when we got married. Yeah.
And I think one thing that's so interesting is just it's hard as a mom, but the things that you struggle with do get passed on if they're not dealt with. And that's a hard truth. And we're going to talk about mom culture and what you see on social media, but it's kind of just what I see a lot, especially from culture, but Christians too, is, well, it's okay. You just need to do whatever you need to do to get through the day. And if you need to complain about your kids on social media, and if you just need to get wasted at 4 o'clock, and so I think something that I learned in my training was that whatever is going on with you does get passed on to your kids if it doesn't get worked out. And so how did, you just opened up about your own anxiety stuff. What did you What did you do there? How did you get help?
Yeah, in 2010 is a little bit about our family. So my husband Aaron and I have been married for 20 years. We have 4 kids.
Congrats.
Thank you. We have 4 kids.
You don't look like you could be married for 20.
Thank
Did you get married when you're like 15?
No, but I was young, 23, I think.
Okay.
But so we have 4 kids, and we had 1 biological. He's 17 now. It's a whole thing. I have a senior. And
all the country songs about 17.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then we have a 16-year-old who was born in Haiti and came home at 4.5. We have a 15-year-old who was a domestic adoption. Okay. And then we have a 13-year-old girl who was also born in Haiti, came home at 2. So that's our family dynamic.
Yes.
So in 2010, I don't know if you remember, that was when the earthquake happened in Haiti. The first major one. Yeah, that we all remember. Well, our son was still there. Oh my gosh. So our daughter had come home, but we had been in the process of adopting him for 2.5 years. Wow. So 2.5 years of just visiting Haiti every 3 months, me or my husband. And so it was just a lot. Right. And then in 2010, he came home. And so we became a family of 6.
Oh my gosh.
And our son was 4.5. Yeah. And, he'd never lived with a family. There's, trauma.
Was he in an orphanage or what?
He was in.
How does that work?
He wasn't in a technical orphanage, but it was like that. He was around a lot of children. He was kind of like in a foster home, actually, which was great. Yeah. So all of a sudden, I go from in 3 months, mom to 2 to mom to 4, with lots of complexities. Kids that were not born in this country, language barriers, attachment barriers, all kinds of things, and I had never experienced what I experienced that year. And I went to my doctor, who's a friend of ours, and just said, I don't think I can do this. Yeah. Like I'm exhausted. I'm anxious. I am having terrible thoughts. Like I just can't do this.
Right.
And the first thing he said to me, because he loves Jesus and he goes to our church, he said, it makes me kind of teary. He said, have you talked to your friends about this? And I hadn't.
Yeah.
A few, but it's hard. And that's why I'm saying, like,
especially when they're in like not the same situation.
Yes. Like, and it also felt like, why could you be upset? Why is something hard for you that you've wanted for 2.5 years? I know that some parents could relate to that if you've walked through infertility and then you're like, motherhood is hard.
Yes.
And so it was
like,
then,
but you pray for this. You made all of us pray for it.
Yes. So get yourself together and be happy. And so it was there that he put me on some medicine. I can't remember what it was. But I was on it for like 9 months, and then I felt like I kind of hit my stride and was better. And then in 2020, my husband was diagnosed with depression. And so that was difficult. That was hard. He's a pastor and he's been on medicine since then and it's been super helpful. And so that's been our journey with mental health.
Right.
Situational for me, not for him. And we're just walking through it. But for our kids, I think it was important for me as a mom, stay-at-home mom to 4 kids who had all of their unique challenges to take care of myself.
Right.
And I just think when you talk about passing down to kids, I don't necessarily think, well, you know way more about this than I do. I don't know about, because only one of my kids has any of my DNA. Yeah. But I do know that the home matters. Right. And so I needed to make sure that I could create a stable environment. And if I wasn't stable, I could not create a stable environment. Yeah. And so that's kind of where it was good for me to have to walk through that.
Yes. I think what I was saying was the opposite. I have a lot of moms kind of like, my child has anxiety. I'm like, do you have anxiety?
Yeah. And you can see that.
Yeah. Because they pick up on it. And I heard one time it was, children are excellent observers, but they're terrible interpreters.
Oh, that's so convicting.
I know. I was like, oh. And it was
I'm
really
going to go home tonight. I'm going to interpret everything you've been seeing about mom's life for you.
Right. No, but that was something that really stuck with me. God decided for me to become a therapist before having triplets. So I was like, thank you. But just that they are observing, but they can't interpret what's going on. So did you tell your older kids that you were struggling, or they were still children?
My oldest was 6.
Yeah.
Well, he was in kindergarten, and so we never had that conversation at the time. I would not be worried about I'm telling you and all the world. Right. So it's not a secret, but it was. Now I'll tell you this: my kids are old now, and we've been walking through this with my husband. They know all about this, and so we talk about depression. That sometimes dad feels sad. And we talk about the fact that he goes to counseling. We talk about the fact that medicine has been helpful for him. And so those have been good conversations. Also, without telling any of my kids' business, I feel like maybe like we're all in counseling. Like we're just a counseling. We love counseling in our family. Yeah. And so it's helpful for them to see
yes.
Mom goes to counseling, Dad goes to counseling. This is okay. Like, I don't
and what's so interesting is all of Psalms and Proverbs that talks about counseling. It's like, just because we live in 2021, we have a formal counselor. I mean, most Christians would say, like that's in the Bible, and now we have a formal way to do it. And some people it's ongoing, and some people it's not. We actually have 7 adopted kids in our family. It's not in our immediate family, but it's different stories. And I think sometimes parents don't know what to do, like with attachments. And I mean, what is your opinion on adoption and counseling and forming those attachments? Do you have, not opinion, advice, I guess, on that?
I think my advice that I always give is if you're bringing home a child that has had a bunch of loss, which I'll say up front, every adoption starts with loss.
Right.
Adoption doesn't start with no loss. Every adoption has loss. Yeah. We had a son come home from the hospital. There's still loss there in that situation that he will deal with and does deal with. I always say, get everyone get counseling as soon as possible. We didn't do that as soon as possible. And so I'm saying this as someone looking back. Yeah. Now, Aaron and I went to counseling. Aaron's been in counseling, and our kids did a little bit when they were little. But I would say, man, get everybody in your family in counseling way sooner than later.
Yes, and I mean, just someone listening, like, why? Everything seems fine.
And I say to that is that everything seems fine, but it's not fine,
right? Because
your child has gone through loss,
right?
And I think as parents and as adults, we can help them by helping them, work through those emotions that they don't even know they have.
Right.
And so we're even in that ball game right now with teenagers, trying to help them understand emotions that they don't even know how to name.
Right.
And it's hard work.
Yes.
And I need people that are way smarter than me to help my kids with this.
So I can't believe we're talking about this. I actually worked with adoptive families a lot, and something I kept seeing, I don't know if this happened in your family or not, but it was parents that, I mean, they were hurt that their adopted kids still wanted a relationship or still had a longing or still had questions about their biological parents. Yeah. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think without seeming harsh, I think that comes from a lot of pride and privilege because you want to be everything for your kids. And it also comes from a lot of privilege because you're the one parenting the child. You're not the one that made the decision to place them for adoption, or you're not the one that died because of a disease. Like you have this privilege here. But I also always want to say, I already said it, we have to recognize that there's been so much loss.
Yes.
I mentioned we have a son through domestic adoption. He's been with us since the day he was born. Yeah. He still has loss. He has loss that he doesn't know where he came from. He doesn't know he doesn't know these things. We're super grateful to have an open adoption. Yeah. So we have those conversations. We have the ability to have that with his first mom. And I really think that the best thing we can give our kids who joined our family through adoption is the safety to know that they are safe to explore all of their history.
Wow. Okay. That's really big of y'all. Yeah. I mean, how did y'all get to that place? Because I mean, it really is. I think also from fear. Like, I think a lot of parents are scared.
But I would push back and be like, what are you afraid of? Yeah. And I know what they were like, well, what if they choose them over me? Yeah. But listen, I have a 17-year-old biological son. You know what he could do when he turns 18? He could leave the house and never come back. And so there's just, we don't have as much control. Exactly. Yeah, I hope not. And I don't think so. But we don't have as much control over our kids as we think that we do. They will turn into adults and they will make decisions. And so I want my kids, who I did not birth, to know that I love them unconditionally forever. They are part of our family. God put them here for a purpose. Like, this is not an accident that they're at Ivey. But I also want them to know that we trust and believe that they came from someplace. Yeah. That they do have a mom and dad that created them. And so we call them their first parents. Like, we are very much acknowledged. Yeah, you had parents before you had me. Yes. No matter what the situation was, and no matter if they were great parents or bad parents, they were your parents. Yeah. And so that gives kids a lot of confidence, and it helps them feel secure. Like, I'm not a therapist, but I would imagine the more a kid could feel secure in their home, knowing that they weren't born there, it would give them like the strength to be like, you know what? I can trust this. I can trust the process. I can trust my parents. I can trust God in this.
And there's a lot of false guilt. Like, that's kind of what I've seen is kids that, like, I mean, they do obviously naturally have a longing to know where they came from. Yeah. And then maybe, like, if the adoptive parent isn't super secure in that, and then they feel, like, guilty, but it's a natural longing. Yes. And that enters into spiritual stuff, too, for sure.
One thing I would advise, too, is if anyone is feeling that way, man, start read books by older adoptees. Yes. Because they're going to say, this is how my parents were and this is how it affected me. And I'm like, I need to tune in and listen to that because they have experience that I don't have. Right. And their experience matters and is valid.
So the children that have grown up, do you have some favorite books?
No, but I can send you some. I can send you some for real and let you know because I think it's helpful. It's really,
Oh, this is so fun. This isn't what we were going to talk about today.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, but I think that I'm so glad you said all of that. I think it enters into what we were going to talk about is how two things, being a mom in today's culture and explaining to our kids that we're trying, hopefully they accept Christ and trying to raise as Christians. Yeah. How do you explain, you have teenagers, I have toddlers, so different, but how do you explain to your kids why y'all do things or why you don't do things or why we believe this?
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that y'all are not in a bubble and that y'all are part of your community. Yeah. So how do those conversations happen?
Yeah. It's hard. Again, we have teenagers. I'm dealing with a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 13-year-old.
Oh.
These are big people here that we're having conversation
so we'll have a prayer time.
Yes, exactly. Pray for us. And we love our teenagers. I mean, teenagers, literally, it's our favorite. Yeah, Aaron and I were both in student ministry years ago.
That's why we're getting along so well.
And so I love teenagers. The crazy, and I don't think the brain's fully formed, but we are having a lot of fun with them. But all that to say, we have conversations about the fact that we just choose to parent differently because of things that we believe. And so we don't want to raise our kids in a bubble. We are really we are not going to raise our kids in a bubble, but we want to let our kids know that we are different and set apart. And not like different and set apart because we only listen to Christian music, because that's not even true of us. But we're different and set apart because of values that we have, because of morals that we have, because of spiritual, the things that God has given us with kindness and goodness and gentleness, the fruits of the Spirit. Like those are things that set Christians apart, at the end of the day, is these attributes that the Holy Spirit gives us. And so as we talk to our kids, we try to say, here's why, because we value family time. So you don't get to just go spend the night at your friend's house whenever you want, because when we're going to have family dinner, it's what we do. It's a part of our culture of our family as an Ivey. And so,
I already hear it. It's not us. You're going to do what we say.
Yes, we really value that our family has certain values. And one of them is family dinners. And I'll tell you what, that is really difficult when you have 4 teenagers. And that doesn't sound like a Christian value, but it is a value that we're instilling in our kids, that our family is important, and we believe that. And I think that God honors that, and God wants that.
Just practically, how do you do that?
Sometimes we eat dinner at 8:30 at night.
Okay.
I mean, what time do your kids go to bed?
Until recently, 6:45.
This is what I'm saying.
And now it's 9:00.
Okay, well,
and they sing songs from Annie and jump around and put on.
Okay, so remember when they went to bed at 6:45, right? And you were eating dinner at 5:15.
Yes,
I remember those days. Now, I mean, if we have football practice that people are coming home from, we might be eating dinner at 8:30 at night.
This is like every night?
Well, not every night, but like,
is there a goal?
I now have working kids.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's a whole nother ball game. And so we're like, our family texts are like, who's home tonight?
Okay.
I mean, this is a whole new world. Yeah. You know where your kids are at all times. I don't. And so just those type of practically, we really value that. And so I'll give you a practical example. The other night, one of my kids was like, hey, some friends are going bowling. Can I go? And I was like, sure. I said, but we're eating dinner. Dad's making dinner Sunday night. He's making dinner tonight. And he's like, but they're leaving before. And I'm like, we're eating dinner together. I'm sorry. And so he ended up changing his plans and got a ride, but it was just like, this is what we're doing tonight.
Right.
So that's just, we've always done that. We'll always do it. And it's a value that we love.
Okay. So you talked about not being in a bubble. What does that practically look like? Because a lot of people are really scared right now with everything going on and in schools. And what does that look like for your family being in the world but not of it?
Yeah. It feels scary sometimes. But Aaron and I have never lived that way either. You know, we've never lived in a bubble. As much as we try not to, and he's a pastor, you know this world. Yeah. He's a pastor. I have a Christian podcast. Like, we do a lot of Christian things.
Yeah, I also went to public school, though. So
so all my kids are in public school, you know, and so that is number one right there. You're out of a bubble, is our kids are in public school. And so we're having conversations with them about things that are very culture different than what we're living with, about sexuality, you know, about transgender. I mean, we're having these conversations because they're having these conversations. And so one thing about not being a bubble is we're always thinking, I think I heard Dr. Moore say that you got to be 3 steps ahead of your kids' friends, which means, Mom, hold on. You're going to have to be having these conversations about hard sexuality things by like first grade because they're going to hear them. And so I think that is something that we've tried really hard to do is have conversations about what's happening in the culture from a Christ-centered biblical worldview. But also, I tell you, Aaron and I really want to help our kids be thinkers. Yeah. And so there are times when I want to tell them what they should think about an issue. And I let them think about it. And I tell them what I think. Yeah. But I ask them, how would you handle this? What do you think about this? And there are times when I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said
Wrong
that.
Thought.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you to rewind and we're going to start over from the beginning.
Yes.
But I don't want to give my kids my faith. I want them to have their own faith because I did that. Yeah. My parents, they were awesome parents, but I didn't have my own faith till I was 21 and it caused me a lot of pain because I just believed I was standing on their faith. And then that doesn't actually hold anyone up. You know, I have to believe in Jesus for myself. Right. And so even with cultural stuff, I want my kids to be deep thinkers. I want them to be holistic. I want them to care for people and minorities and the disadvantaged. And I want them to figure that out. And that's hard to watch sometimes. It really is.
Yeah, I'm sure. So how do you redirect? Like whenever it's, okay, let me know your thoughts. Not those thoughts.
Yeah.
What
I think
scripture?
I think I tell them how I came to my thoughts. You know, this is why we think this. I mean, we don't watch the news a lot in our family because it's a little stressful. No, I'm going to prefer to watch I don't know, Survivor.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I delete Instagram like twice a day. Yeah. I'm like,
yeah. So, you know, I read a lot of news. I will say that. And so just bringing up conversations with the kids about things that are happening in the world is scary and hard. And sometimes I'm like, I just don't want to have this conversation with a 15-year-old who doesn't have fully formed thoughts. And I'm sure they're just thinking out of their emotions. We all do that. But I do just try to tell them, this is how I landed here and this is why. And a lot of that comes from my faith, you know, you can't get around certain issues without bringing your faith into it. And so
do you have a substantial amount of people that you still can do life with in the public school? You have lots of Christians and people that still, I guess it's just, you know, some people get concerned about it only being a mission field. But I mean, my experience was that's how I learned to witness was in elementary school and my friends not being Christians and inviting them to VBS. Yeah. I mean, that's how I met my husband. It's a huge part of our story. But I think a lot of people are saying transgender changes things. People that previously were like, yeah, we're going to go and make a difference in the world, but really are specifically scared about this.
I don't live in a lot of fear with that. Okay. Although I am an Enneagram 6, if you know anything about that. Okay. We have a lot of fear issues. Okay. I don't live in a lot of fear with that because, how do I say this? Our kids are they're going to be in the world. It is impossible unless you go live in a bunker underground, which there are oftentimes, I would like to choose that. Our kids are going to live in the world. I know the argument is they're too young to put them there, but I think it's a personal conviction. Yeah. Our family's in public school. That is is a personal thing. I am not saying public is better than private or anything. It's where God led us. It's where God led us. And so for me, I want my kids to have those interactions. Right. because I'm not scared of a 5th grader who's struggling with their sexuality. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Like, that is a 5th grader who's struggling with sexuality, and they might be confused. They might need Jesus, all these things. And those things just don't scare me.
Yeah.
I believe way more in God than I do a 5th grader converting my child to believe something else.
Right.
I hope that's not wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I think that God is preparing us for these things. I think he's having conversations. Again, this is our family's journey of how we handle this.
Well, I think that's one reason I wanted to ask that, because it's in a lot of Christian circles being presented as the only option
is to pull your kids out. Yeah. And again, if that's what God asks you to do, that is one thing.
So that's
if it is out of fear, I think that's another thing. And I would just push into that a little bit and be like, what are you afraid of? You know, what are you afraid of? These things aren't scaring me right now.
Yeah. And God's called different families to different things. Yeah. So my dad really likes to talk about legalism. And he has this great definition. It's making your conviction someone else's obligation. And just realizing, I mean, we can't all leave public school.
Yeah,
totally. Someone has to stay. And I mean, with student ministry, I mean, it's 80% of people become Christians before 15. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really neat that some people are still called to stay and excited about it and like doing that. And that conversation's really getting lost right now in a lot of Christian circles. So anyway, thanks for sharing about that.
I just say God is bigger than our fears.
Right.
And take them to the Lord.
And I mean, one thing that I always say is, like, my parents were able to answer my questions. And obviously I had the privilege of having really solid theologically parents. But we have the internet and you can find the answers.
Which if your kids are around other kids, you have to have these hard conversations. It is not an option to not have these conversations. Yeah. Like when I meet parents who haven't talked to their kids about sex and they're in 5th grade, I'm like, you're too late. Yeah. They already know. Right. They're like, what? Yes, they already know. I mean, the statistics of how early kids are seeing pornography is it's horrible. Yeah. And so we as parents, and listen, I will say this too, and don't get mad at me, people. It's not any different in private school. Yeah.
What?
It's not any different in private school.
I'm gonna challenge you with their argument. The argument is that the teachers are different. That's what people say.
My kids have really great teachers. Okay. And a lot of them love Jesus. But I'll push back to that argument.
So they say, well, it's the curriculum.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. But you know what? Okay. I'll say, I hear you on that. But I will also say there are other kids there that are also going to be presenting them with things. Yeah. Most of your kids are not hearing about sex from their teachers. They're hearing about it from their peers. And so those peers are in every school, wherever you are, you know? And so I think when parents put their kids in private school because they're afraid and they think this will do my job. Yeah. That's not okay. Yeah. And so again, I'm not against private school. We have friends that love private school. Yeah. It's a thing. My brother went to private school his whole life. I just think if you're doing it out of fear and then you're stepping back and saying, let these Christian teachers do my job, it's not healthy for your kid or for your parent or for your relationship. So
good. That was great.
Send all of your emails here.
I actually have a very popular episode on going public just because it was such a part of our story. So anyway.
I read a really great book and I'll send it to you when I get home. Okay. Yeah, about this. It really helped me because I struggled with this sending my first kid to kindergarten. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about your book. God made you to be you. Does that mean?
I love it so much.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so this kid's book, this is Sammy, and these are all his friends. And this book came to me because I released a book in October 2020 called You Be You. Right. And it is really about women just living in their calling and not comparing and really walking and running the race that God has put before them. And in the story, in the book, there's a story about a trip that my husband and I took to Sedona, Arizona. And when we were driving up, I would see these big saguaro cacti. They're huge, beautiful. And then as we got closer, I noticed I didn't see them anymore. And so I just kind of made a mental note like, oh, they're not here the more we got to northern Arizona. And we were on a little pink Jeep tour, and it was so fun. And the guide was telling us why.
Does that mean the Jeep was pink?
It was pink.
Oh, okay.
It's called the Pink Jeep Tours. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, take it if you're there. It's so much fun.
Oh,
but he was telling us why the cactus are not in northern Arizona. And he was saying they're too large. They have so much water that it would freeze and they would fall over and die. He said they were never meant to thrive here.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, this is what we do as women. We want to thrive where God never intended us to be. In lots of different, whether that's our work, our family, where we live, what we do. And so that became a theme of that book. You know, that story happened a couple of years before, and it kind of was this kind of catalyst for this whole book that I wrote. Awesome. And then I started thinking, like, what if we did a kid's book about a cactus who wanted to be more like his friends? And so in the book, it talks about how he can't run, he can't jump, he can't sing like a coyote, he can't slither like a snake. I know. And he looks around at all his friends and he's like, I wish I was more like you. And then they come and they're like, this isn't true. And they tell him all the things that he does do. And then he says, God made me to be me and you to be you. And so I love this book so much.
Yes.
I'm so proud of it. Your kids are going to love it.
Oh, yeah. I'm so excited because people are always asking, oh, so they're triplets. So, like, how alike are they and how different? I'm like, very, very different. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's like a social experiment having 3 people the exact same age growing up together. So we're always talking about differences, and that's what that person's interested in, and that's what that person likes to do. And we teach them a lot. I mean, because you can even see their giftings, like, even at this age, like, so they sit there and clap for the other one and what they're doing. So but good. I mean, it obviously, like, you're comparing, you're literally growing up in his every day, every moment with 2 people your exact same age. So I'm very excited about this.
I love it so much.
How do you tell parents to help them discover their children's giftings? And do you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, not a lot, but I love it because I have 4 kids. I think that one of the things we can do as parents is give our kids a lot of opportunities. And I understand that there's privilege involved in that with, you know, it's expensive to have opportunities, believe me. But they're also just, we live in an age where you can expose your kids to so much, even on the internet. I mean, you can take piano lessons on the internet for the love. I mean, you can do anything that you want. But I just say give them a bunch of opportunity, but also show them a bunch of people doing different things. Right. I think that's important for my kids to see, look at all of these different opportunities. And especially when I find out that someone's a Christian, I'm like, look at this guy who is like following Jesus and doing this amazing thing. It just makes me so happy. I mean, we're a big football family and all my boys play football. And so I love when I find a story of someone who loves Jesus and is pursuing football. Not that I think my kids are going to play football forever. They're not. But they like it now, you know, and so it's a good way to show them that. So I think that's important for us as well as parents, is to really find people in different fields. You know, one of my kids wants to be a chef. And so we have a friend who's a chef. And so we're constantly trying to get him around him and talk about him. So that's one of the things. But also, I love what you said that your kids cheer each other on, because I say that for women all the time. Is for women to become cheerleaders for those around them. And it's really hard to compare yourself to someone when you're cheering for them genuinely. Right. You know, it would be, I host a podcast, you host a podcast. It would be easy for one of us to be like, I wish I was more like her. Da, da, da. But what if we became each other's biggest fans and biggest cheerleaders? No longer would we want to be like each other. We'd be so proud of each other.
I always say there's enough non-Christians and people hurting to go around. Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's enough.
Yes, we should be so for each other. Yeah. And so I think this comes out in the book a little bit, but I love that you said that about your kids, is teaching our kids to really be for each other's gifts. And we have a lot of kids, but some people don't have that many, but you can still do that with your neighborhood kids, your kids at your preschool.
And what you're saying about it being expensive, I mean, even if you don't go, you're not actually like a member of a big church. Churches, I mean, I know you go to a big church too, like ours, we have just opportunities. So if you're like, well, I can never pay for private whatever, but a lot of churches have music programs and I have a girls leadership team, and like what we do is we sit around and talk about like, what are you interested in, and then like I make ways for them to I mean, that doesn't cost anything. It's just coming to church. So really, even if you're not a member of a huge church, looking at churches in your area, a lot of them have programs if it's, you know, something you can't afford.
I love it. And it's crazy to think, I was talking to someone the other day and they said, it's, you know, I went to college, I graduated from college like, you know, I don't know, 24 years ago. And she said the crazy thing is that when she was talking to me, and she's like, when you were in college, there wasn't even podcasting wasn't even a thing. And so sometimes I think about our kids, and I'm like, what will be around that we have not even imagined yet? Yes. You know what I mean? It's like, I love like telling my kids that. I tell them that like podcasting, mom's job did not exist. Yeah. I mean, even probably when my son was born 17 years ago, you know? And so I'm like, just imagine what you could do.
True. When I was 5, we would have our family dinners, and every Saturday night I would tell my dad I want an agent because I want to do Christian TV. Oh. And like they thought I would outgrow it. Uh-huh. I didn't.
Here we are.
So just being funny, but I mean, kids, you actually can see what they're interested in. Yeah. I think a lot of times we kind of discount. Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes it sound like my parents discounted what I wanted to do.
No, but if you're 5 years old.
But, right. But I think like really seeing what they're interested in and not necessarily like rolling your eyes at it is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can people stay connected to you? Can you tell us about your podcast? Yeah. Tell people watching.
So fun. So I host a podcast called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey. Mm-hmm. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. JamieIvey.com is my webpage, which has everything. I love Instagram. Yeah. I have a love-hate, but I do love it. So I'm there at Jamie Ivey. And then you can get books wherever you buy books. So that's where you get me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great. And so get God Made You to Be You, and also the adult version is You Be You. Yep. Right. Okay. Well, thanks for coming today. I'm so excited. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
I'm so excited about this conversation with my friend Jamie Ivey. If you know someone, you know a parent, you know a teacher, someone that is trying to sift through adoption or public school, transgender, please encourage them to take a listen in this episode. It's available at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.